Daniel chapter 10 is where we're going to be tonight. One of the most really fascinating chapters in all of the Bible. I will tell you a couple of things. Daniel 10, 11, and 12 are really one vision. So there's not separation there. It's all one complete event for Daniel. And the other thing I'll tell you, this is the deep end of the pool, right? So if you're taking, when you take lessons, swim lessons, and they start you on the baby end of the pool, and then the more advanced you get to go to the deep end of the pool. This is the deep end of the pool, Daniel's 10, 11, and 12, because there's some really heavy stuff in here that will work to break down and break out so that it's usable. But 10, specifically to me, is one of the most fascinating chapters in all the Bible. We see visions of the other side in other experiences of biblical people, biblical characters, but not like this. What we see in this is the spiritual conflict between good and evil. We get to see what was experienced because of Daniel's prayer. So Daniel was praying, and there was spiritual warfare going on because of his prayer. He was seeking to connect to God, to get information for his people. He was wanting to be closer to God, if you want to put it that way. And the enemy, Satan, the demons, did not want that to happen. And so we get to see in this chapter what happens. There was an angelic conflict there. And I think it's fascinating because that still happens today. And maybe sometime we'll do a study on spiritual warfare, the demonic angelic conflict. But let me stay focused because I'll get so totally sidetracked on this. So chapters 10, 11, and 12 is one vision, and it relates to the nation of Israel. And I specifically want to point that out because none of this vision has the church in it. All right? And this is where amillennialists get off task. And amillennialists will not, the more I see and read and watch some of this stuff, they're not grabbing all of the word. They're taking word and then they become interpretive or self-interpretive of the word instead of taking it literally. All right? And I think that is the difference between that, and what the danger there is that it can become, your interpretation can vary by person perhaps, or it can vary to connect the facts that you want to connect, right? But if you take it literally, then you can't do that. And this specifically says, there's a spot in here that this is Daniel's was given information for his people, the nation of Israel. So the church is not in that mix. Now, the church is part of the end time story, but not this story. All right? So we'll see why. But couple quick historical pieces here. This wasn't too long after the Lion's Den event with Daniel. So this was the third year of Cyrus. That was 534 BC, which was about 4 years after the vision of 70 weeks. Anyway, it was in kind of that, it was late in Daniel's life. Really late in Daniel's life. He was in his 80s, maybe 90, depending on how you kind of timeline his life. But there is this reference here, this insight to what happens into the realm we cannot see. So, you always think a little bit of the Twilight Zone in that, another dimension of time and space or whatever it was that, they used to intro that show with. But it's kind of the truth. So the aspect here is that this is the devil and the enemy opposing us, and we get to see that, right, in this story. And where did demons come from? Where did the devil come from? God did not create evil. Good cannot create evil. Jonathan Cahn, in his new book, The Dragon's Prophecy, right, talks about this, and I won't get into it because I'm still listening to it, and I've had to go back. I'm doing an audiobook on it, and I'm listening to it again, and it is really deep. Ray, would you agree with that?
Yeah. It's good up to chapter 66.
Okay, all right. I'm only on 11.
Yeah,
so,
we'll get into that later.
But in that, he talks about where evil came from. Well, evil came because there was opposition to good, right? And there can only be good, and so there can't be a little bit good. It's not, in God's perspective, this is my interpretation, not his, that if God is good and holy and righteous, anything that is not perfectly good and holy and righteous, in his eyes, is evil and wicked. And so the prideful choice that Satan made to rise up and say, I want to sit in God's chair, if you want to put it that way, that's what he said. I'm going to sit in God's chair. In fact, I want to sit higher than God, technically, is kind of how that reads when you look at that. And what is crazy, and we underestimate in our time, the ability of the devil to lay out evil thoughts. He talked into following him 1/3 of the angels of heaven. And by estimates of people who study deeply in the Word, there's billions of angels, right? And he talked to 1/3 of them. They were living in heaven. They saw God every day. They worshiped him. For however many, what we would consider years, that was, they did that until he talked them into it. If he can talk angels living in the presence of God, if he can talk them into following him, we have to be totally on guard, because he can make the worst, awful, most wicked, in God's eyes, right, thing seem like, oh, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just a little thing. God ain't going to worry about that, right? And he can make that look good, and all of a sudden it gets us off. Because if it's not completely aligned with the good and the holy and the righteous of God, it's completely evil and wicked. And that's how God looks at it. Right? So there are around us fallen angels created by God. They are no longer what they were created to be. So Satan, it was originally known as Lucifer, the angel of light. Well, now he's what? The prince of darkness. He's completely opposite of what he was created to be. Same thing with all these other demons. They're opposite of what they were created to be. Now, that does not diminish their power. They still have more power than us, right? But their purpose has been corrupted, just like our purpose is corrupted, if we don't pursue what God created us to do. Or if we get off, or we, off task, or we never pursue it because we never truly follow God. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
So Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, both show us the story of Satan. We won't get into it tonight, but that's where it's at. And, there's not a little opposition to God. In God's perspective of good and holy and right, anything that is not good and holy and right is what? Completely wrong. Which is why grace is such a wonderful gift that he gives us. Because we can't be right and good and holy. It's not in our ability to do it. But his forgiveness through Jesus Christ and his grace and his mercy allow us then complete access and forgiveness for those things. And I think part of the reason they call it, I've heard it called cheap grace, and that's probably, I don't have a better description of it, but why it seems like in our time there's so much of this. You see people who say, well, I'm a Christian. I had this discussion today. in a work-related thing, another person in my company and I were talking about this account rep who talks Christ, but the email that he has sent today, and this person in my company and I were talking about it, he says, that makes me not ever want to do business with this guy again. And I said, here's the problem. I said, this is conduct unbecoming who he claims that he is and who he follows. And the guy was kind of quiet. Well, yeah. And I said, no, I'll put it this way. I said, he claims to be a Christian, but that conduct and that attitude and the thing that happened right there, I said, he looks like everybody else doing business in the world that doesn't claim to be a Christian. And I said, if you're going to claim to be a Christian, then look like one.
Yep.
Act like one. It was the discussion that we had. And I think when I bring that up, the cheapness or the fact that we don't even talk about good and evil anymore from the pulpit, by and large, or teach it, right? We teach the love of Christ, and I get that. That's important. But if we don't we don't have a way to offset it, right? We think we're okay. I'm okay. Because we don't talk about how does God really look at this? And that's how God really looks at it. And so to the point that these demons, these angels, were not allowed to stay in heaven. They chose to follow the pride of Lucifer, and then everything that they were then completely switched, and they are no more good. They're evil, and they're wicked, and they oppose God in every way. Questions, thoughts on any of that?
I used to have thought. Grace is the one thing that Satan can't deal with.
Yeah.
He really can't combat that, because I can always fall on my knees every day and ask God to forgive me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's he going to do?
Yep. And he yeah, that's right. He can't deal with that. He really can't. Hate comes as the opposite of love. Satan hates, God loves. Right? So Satan and his demons hate good because they hate God. Right? In that choice that they made, something switched in them. And now they can't love. Well, we can't love either, because of sin. But because of forgiveness of sin, and because Christ fills our heart, now we can love again. But apart from Christ, there's no way.
If you don't have Christ in your heart, then you can't love? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying not the way that that Christ loves,
intended.
Right? And it's an intended form. Yeah, we can love others, but I'm saying that in how he loves us,
yes,
this unconditional, forgiving kind of way, right? In that. So the spiritual battle, all right, is the essence of the spiritual battle is that Satan hates God, hates everyone who wants to serve God, hates every purpose of everyone who's serving God, hates the positive output, hates the good that they're trying to do. He hates everyone who's in the service of God. So how does that where's this spiritual warfare come from? That's where this comes from. So the essence of spiritual battle is rooted in that act of rebellion that happened. Who knows how many years ago? I mean, we don't know in terms of years. It could be millions of what we consider years of that all happened, right? Messiah, Jesus, will come and put down that rebellion and all rebellion. And so we were talking about a little bit earlier the lake of fire. All rebellion, those who have not been forgiven for that. So Satan and all the demons will go to the lake of fire. The Antichrist and the false prophet will go to the lake of fire. And then anyone whose name, it says, is not written in the Lamb's book of life will spend eternity separated from God because their sins were not forgiven. And so Messiah will come, and that's rebellion because our sins were not forgiven. That is rebellion against God. That is how that's considered. And Messiah will put down all rebellion when he comes. So evil and sin have an eternal punishment in the lake of fire. And I'm sure that that is going to be just as bad as it sounds like it would be. So that is why there's great hope in end-time discussion. Because we can look forward to the day that all of this is going to be put down. The stuff, there's a security guard in the grocery store I go to in Champaign. Sitting at the door. It's like, someday, Well, why is there a security guard at the door? Because apparently people walk out the door with things that don't belong to them. Mm-hmm. Or there's been other issues, right? So it's like, okay, someday that isn't going to happen. But until then, there's something that causes that kind of action. What causes that kind of action is spiritual warfare. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. That's a long setup, I get it, but that's what Daniel chapter 10 is. So let me read Daniel chapter 10. I'm going to read this from the New Living Testament, just because it flows. When we break it down tonight, I'm going to go back to the New American Standard. But just to help it flow and kind of get the essence of this, I like the way the New Living puts this. So in Daniel chapter 10, verse 1, it says this. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Cyrus of Persia, Daniel, also known as Belteshazzar, had another vision. He understood that the vision concerned events certain to happen in the future times of war and great hardship. And when this vision came to me, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 whole weeks. All that time I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine crossed my lips, and I used no fragrant lotions until those 3 weeks had passed. On April 23rd, as I was standing at the bank of the great Tigris River, I looked up and saw a man dressed in linen clothing, with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body looked like a precious gem. His face flashed like lightning, and his eyes flamed like torches. His arms and feet shone like polished bronze, and his voice roared like a vast multitude of people. Only I, Daniel, saw this vision. The men with me saw nothing, but they were suddenly terrified and ran away to hide. So I was there, all alone, to see this amazing vision. My strength left me, and my face grew deathly pale, and I felt very weak. Then I heard the man speak, and when I heard the sound of his voice, I fainted and lay there with my face to the ground. Just then a hand touched me and lifted me, and still trembling, to my hands and knees, and the man said to me, Daniel, you are very precious to God, so listen carefully to what I have to say to you. Stand up, for I have been sent to you. When he said this to me, I stood up, still trembling. Then he said, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before God, your request has been heard in heaven. I have come to answer to your prayer. But for 21 days, and this is the essence of what we're going to study tonight, for 21 days, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now I am here to explain what will happen to your people in the future. Okay, that's the key. One of the keys here is us talking about Israel. Who was Daniel's people? The Jewish people, Israel. I have come to tell you what will happen to your people in the future, for this vision concerns a time yet to come. While he was speaking to me, I looked at the ground, unable to say a word. Then the one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing in front of me, I am filled with anguish because of the vision I have seen, my Lord. I am very weak. How can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. Then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength returning. Don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace, be encouraged, be strong. And as he spoke these words to me, I suddenly felt stronger, and I said to him, please speak to me, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. Verse 20. He replied, "Do you know why I have come? Soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. And after that, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece will come. Meanwhile, I will tell you what is written in the book of truth, that no one helps me against these spirit princes except Michael, your spirit prince." So there's a lot there. And again, this is the deep end of the pool. So the question is, what happened here? Well, Dr. McGee, I'm relying heavily on some of his work on this. He breaks this down as to the spiritual battle aspect of this. Angels, before I do that, let me point one thing out. Go back to, there was two visions here. Daniel saw the glorified Jesus Christ. Okay? That's first. And we'll look at this in a second. Yeah, Connie.
So was that the man that had lightning bolts
Yep.
and
Yep.
the bronze?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's
So
first.
That was Jesus.
Yes. Yes. And then there was an angel. And what freaked Daniel out, what blew him away, was to see Christ like that, which is the same response John had, when he saw him in Revelation.
Side note here, Saul on the way to Damascus, when he saw Jesus, he heard him talking and everything, but the people with him were afraid.
Yeah.
But they didn't see or hear quite all of that.
Yep.
Same thing here.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and so the consistency of how the Lord reveals himself
Right, exactly.
to these men, in that time. Yeah, fascinating. We'll look at it. If we have time, we'll cross-reference this, Connie, but it's Revelation chapter 1, and in that 14th, 15th verse there is that same description of Christ. This is the glorified Jesus Christ. So we see him, Daniel was given a vision of what he is in his glorified self, And so that was what Daniel got to see, the same thing that John saw. All right. So angels, Dr. McGee said, angels have the ability to exercise free will. He says, since by some of them, their own volition, they followed Satan in rebellion against God. In addition to that, God apparently made them with rank. So what we would call rank and file, right? Which is a military term, and I haven't been in there, but they're, they start out with privates, and then to sergeants, and there's various rank to do with various responsibilities.
And believe me, you don't question someone over you. I tried.
Well, turn to Colossians chapter 1, and we'll look at verse 6. And there's something here that will help us understand this. So the fact that there is a prince of Persia, and in the last verse, princess, so there's more than one angel demon here. And so we want to look at this. Colossians chapter 1, verse 6. Verse 16. Sorry. For by him, God, all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created by him and for him. Colossians 1:16. So Paul here describes thrones, dominions, rulers, and authorities. God created a hierarchy. All right? And so these angels all had this, before their separation from God, they had a rank and file. When they separated, they kept that rank and file. Satan then imitated what God had, which is all he can do. He can't self-create anything. He can only mimic what God has done. So what McGee says here, and what we apparently see in this prince of Persia, and it says there'll be a prince of Greece that comes along, is that there has been ranking of demonic spirits to enact in and over nations, peoples, that kind of thing. So there's a prince of Persia. There's most likely also, then there was going to be a prince of Greece. There's most likely also a prince of the United States of America. And then maybe a prince over, a sub-prince over Illinois. And then if you break it down, I suppose there'd be a prince over the county of Piatt and a prince over the city of Monticello, right? And if you break it down even more than that, there's probably a breakout for, if you want to call it you and me, or families, or churches, or pastors. Absolutely. Total sidebar.
Yeah.
Don't help me not forget where I'm at. But total sidebar. I'm telling you right now, there was something opposing that revival last week. And Jimmy and I were talking about it, and it was either something working on him or something working on us or something working on both of us, because there was some kind of something that it was like something is just off. And I will tell you this, it started with Jimmy about a month ago. He talked a little bit about coming back from Europe, and it was the first time ever he had ever directly shared Jesus Christ from the stage of a rock and roll show. All right, so he did that. Coming back, he got sick. Really sick. He got back for about a week. Then there was an evangelist's retreat up in Michigan. So he was flying from, he flew to Chicago. Chicago caught a commuter up to Michigan, and they got almost there ready to land. They said, folks, we're going to have to go back to Chicago because we don't think we can get the landing gear down. So we get more, there'll be more help for us in Chicago. So they flew all the way back to Chicago, and there were, he said, fire trucks and rescue squads and all that stuff waiting for that plane to go down. Well, the landing gear went down, and but then he missed his commute and all that. So they said, well, we can't get you out till tomorrow. He was concerned about making the connections and all that, so he stayed at the airport all night. And then there was some confusion about the flight. He missed that. So all of this has been going on, right? And then so last week, a week ago tonight, he went from Phoenix to Indy. And on the way over here, long story short, Greg ran out of gas on the highway. Tim and I left to go to see if we could go help them or at least pick them up. And they sat out there on the highway for 3 hours waiting for AAA to never show up. So Tim and I went and got a gas can and at the pilot station over there, and we went back and we filled them up. So something had been opposing him for a month, right? And there's something. I'm just telling you that there's hierarchy and purpose and mission to stand in the way of God's people and God's institution, the church, to fight the good that we're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
You told this congregation long before we had revival to pray and fast. Think back to what he preached on Thursday night and Friday night.
Yep.
That they knew, or whatever was, they knew what he was going to preach.
Yeah.
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 And when we started praying, fasting, they rose.
No, you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. And, I don't know about everybody else, but my normal flow is, hey, God, I'm praying and fasting. This ought to go well for us.
Uh-huh.
And the truth is, I'm praying and fasting, and you're just calling in the opposition.
Absolutely.
You're calling it in, and you got to stay firm and hard and fast with it.
Ephesians 2:8-9. I was thinking Ray hit it right on the nail, on the head. Ephesians 2:8-9 about grace, but Ephesians 2 talks. Paul's giving them a reminders in times past how the prince of the power of the air, he's still active and working. I think he calls it, at least in King James, the children of disobedience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still there. He's there.
Yeah.
And you
So
can
when
jump-
he says the children of disobedience, does he mean the fallen angels?
Prince of power of the air is Satan,
Right.
and he is still active. But the angels that came to Daniel, Michael, you look in verse 9 of Jude, and he said, he doesn't fool with it. The Lord rebuke you.
Yes.
Going to Ephesians chapter 6, he said, the sword of the Spirit is the word of God.
Yes.
And he cannot do anything with it.
Right. Right. And that's the only thing we have. That and prayer. No, go ahead. Keep going.
I just think when we started praying, and if we don't use that word, Jimmy Dell talked a number of times. If we don't use and know God's word, we're done.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
We're just done.
Yep.
He spoke on that several times.
Absolutely. Yes.
Think of it in terms of today. The battle is on. When you've got something going your way, you really want to get in there and keep it going, right?
Yep.
Same way with Satan. If he sees the church falling away and he's winning, is he going to give up? Absolutely not.
Right.
He's going to go even harder.
To try to wipe it out.
Try to wipe it out. Yes. So the battle is on, and that's what we feel
Yeah.
and see.
Yeah. Yeah. There would be people hearing us talk like this right now think we're out of our minds, and let them. At that point, I am unashamed at this point about that, because this is the truth, and we see this. So I'm not pulling something out of the air. I'm looking at what Daniel said. Here's what it is in the New Testament. That God created that. There's a hierarchy and there's a purpose. There's a hierarchy, and Satan is using that. Here, I'll put it this way. You and I all know people who God gifted in a great way that are not using their gift for the purposes of God, right? That's exactly what this looks like in the demonic realm.
Yes.
They were gifted and purposed and empowered to do something for God with that hierarchy, thrones, dominions, whatever, right? They're misusing what they were given to oppose God. And what ends up happening is they're opposing the purposes of God through physical people, physical institutions like the church,
God's creation.
God's creation.
They're opposing that.
Right. So they're misusing their abilities, and they're opposing God at the same time. Same thing that some people do. Does that help define where we're at with that?
It's almost like Satan is jealous of God's creation, so he's going to destroy it.
Yeah.
That's just me talking in my
Yep.
mind.
That's a great thought, though.
If you look at it, that was the beginning of Satan's fall.
Yeah.
Was his jealousy
Right.
and yes, that's what I say. Pride and jealousy is what caused him to fall,
Yeah.
and the fact that he was the head angel, the prettiest angel, the smartest angel, the smoothest angel,
Right.
gave him the ability to talk a third of the other angels into come with me.
Yep. Yep.
But I believe that Satan's fall began with jealousy and pride.
Yeah.
Right. That you can say the root of all evil is anything, but that's
I think you're right on. I think, Mike, that there are some who consider pride the original sin
Yeah.
in that sense, because it was Satan's pride, Lucifer's pride, that welled up inside of him that then caused him to do all those things. You know, why God hates pride the most. So,
You know, it says, Satan, when he seduced Eve into eating apple, pear, whatever it was he was in the Garden of Eden with them, but he was not an angel at the time, was he?
yeah.
Had he already been? He got thrown out of heaven for doing that, or was he? You say the things that he did, things plural. So
He had been kicked out of heaven,
okay,
right? For rebellion against God,
okay,
right? The best description I've heard of this is from Tony Evans, and I think some would call this the gap theory. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And in that, they say, what happened between 1 and 2? If God created everything great and it was wonderful, you know, in the original form, how did the earth become without form and void and darkness upon the face of the deep? So what Tony Evans, his description of this is that between 1 and 2 was where Satan fell.
okay.
All right? And he then came to earth, right? God put him here. And whatever the earth was, he destroyed it. Right? Then God says he's going to remake it. Right? And he's going to show, essentially, and this is too long to do too quickly here, but God said, I'm going to show Satan, he's been sentenced to eternity in hell, right? But before I execute the sentence, this is Tony Evans, I'm going to show him that a lesser being who relies completely on me doesn't need to rebel against me. That a lesser being who relies completely on me can do greater things than he can do, Satan can do on his own. Essentially, that's what he's saying. And so then God remakes the earth, puts man in charge of it, and then Satan tries to, essentially what Tony Evans is saying is that he needs to get man out of the way so he can take back his creation, right? The earth, he wants the earth back. And so he tempts man, and then mankind has the ability to rule over all the earth. God has given the earth to man to rule in conjunction, in fellowship, relationship with him.
Right.
So that together, and we see them working on that, God would bring Adam the animal, and Adam, you call it what you want to call it. You're here to rule. But they were working together, right? At the end of the day, he comes back, Adam, what happened today, right? So all of that. But then, and man and wife, the purpose to populate the earth with other humans, right? Satan wants to bust up the party early, so he comes in and tempts, and then because Adam and Eve disobeyed the one rule, the one command that they had, that created sin. Was it a big deal? Well, it's not like they, but it was, in God's eyes, horrible, because anything that is outside of His holiness and His righteousness is evil.
Right.
But we don't look at it that way. It's like, well, it's one little lie. No, it's completely opposite of what He wants. It's totally not holy, totally not righteous. So then, mankind now is separated from God because of sin. God says, I'm going to fix this, right? In the meantime, he's going to crush the serpent, his heel crushed and all that. But that's, in essence, how from point A to point B we got, right? And from there, and I'm afraid I'm too slim on that discussion, but if that gets us where we need to go, that's where that is. So what happened then? Man still has the ability to rule himself. We still have self-will. We were given the ability of self-will and the ability to rule, because God gave us a purpose for us, but we use that in the wrong way too. We were gifted, we were empowered to make choices, and we make choices, but we make them an opposite choice of what God wants us to do. And it puts us at odds with God in that sense. So we're not using what we were gifted to do in that way, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Anybody else? Yeah, Connie.
Well, it kind of seems like to me that Satan, when he enticed a third of the angels to be on his side, why wasn't the battle continued in heaven then between, getting more angels and overthrowing and become greater than God in his eyes, what he thought he wanted to do
Right.
in the long run?
So why wasn't it worked out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is he still trying to get more angels to leave the heaven and leave God?
I technically don't know the answer to either of those. My gut, from what I understand of the word, is no. He's not. I don't believe he would be still trying to get angels to follow him, but he is trying to get humans that God created to follow him always. And the reason I say that is because God separated him, and those angels,
hurled a third of the stars to the earth or something
Yeah,
like that.
right.
He cast them out of heaven away from the good angels.
Right. Now Satan, we know, has access to heaven because in Job it says, they came and God asked him, "What have you been doing?" "Well, I've been going to and fro on the face of the earth." "Well, what did you find there?" Right? So we know Satan has accountability. He has to come to God and bring accountability for what he's been doing. God holds him accountable like he holds everyone accountable. What have you been doing? So there is that. I don't know if that happens to all of the other angels or if just Satan in that sense. I'm not sure how that works, so I can't answer that question beyond that. But it's interesting to think about.
It's interesting. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Right.
In the big picture of it all.
Yeah.
But it's something.
Mike and then Ray.
I just think that maybe the reason he was cast out of heaven was because heaven is perfect.
Yeah.
And he's not.
Right.
And God can't look upon sin. Now he can talk to Satan because Satan was the head angel and they had direct conversation. Now the other angels, they were like, when you say private, that's underling.
Yeah.
They were underlings.
Right.
And they were sin and he can't look upon sin. So he casts them out because he cannot look on them. And I do believe that he didn't want Satan to have the opportunity to continue to try to recruit his men.
Yeah. Because what we know about Satan is this: he is not going to quit trying to separate people from God until he is thrown in the lake of fire.
Mm-hmm.
He's bound for 1,000 years. He gets out and he tries it again, and he gets an uprising. Right at the end of the millennial reign. So that is true that is the case. So he's always going to keep trying to do that for us. Yeah, Ray.
This will help. Read Revelation chapter 12, but here's part of it. Then there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels, and the dragon lost the battle, and he and his angels were forced out of heaven. This great dragon, the ancient serpent called Devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all his angels. Chapter 12, there's a lot in Revelation 12. It's a whole long story from beginning to end, but there's a lot there.
Is that new book by Khan about the dragon? Is that referring to Revelation 12?
It does.
Yeah, I just kind of got to that chapter today. On
And I agree with all that book up in chapter 66.
Yeah, Bob.
We were talking a while back, a few days, talking about angels, good angels. And Christ, he's driving now. And we're talking about getting power. As long as God has got my power here in the heart. The dogs are down here at my heels.
Yeah.
We keep forgetting about them wheels. It's not the different powers unless the Lord wants it.
Yeah. 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 Anybody else? Well, if you want to turn ahead, turn your Bible to Ephesians chapter 6. We'll spend a little time there. Give you a setup going into that out of Daniel chapter 10 as you're turning there. You know, it says, for 21 days, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. So, you know, there are times we think, well, God didn't answer my prayer. I'm telling you, I think there may be times when our answer is held up. If this is true in Daniel's case, and we understand that there is spiritual opposition, demonic opposition to the people of God, and we understand that Satan is trying to separate God's people from God and trying to bring havoc into their lives, just know that if it happened to Daniel, it most likely has happened to us at some point in time, or will happen to us. Yeah.
Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes we just got to sit our self.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel never gave up, did he? He kept praying.
Redheads are not good with patience.
Daniel might not have been redheaded then, huh? But yeah, I mean, this is where in our modern 21st century interpretive Christian, whatever it is that you want to call this, we don't go deep with this very often. There's very few that are teaching this kind of opposition. And the fact that this is in here and we don't read it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? I mean, just because we don't study it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And so to that, I have a point saying that. People say, well, just don't worry about, you know, the end time studies. Well, just because you don't read the end time studies or preachers say, I'm not going to talk about it, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And it's the same thing with spiritual warfare. Just because we don't like to talk about spiritual warfare doesn't mean spiritual warfare doesn't happen, because it is happening. It happens all the time. You look like you're about to say something.
You can do what you want with this story. It's up to you.
Oh, okay.
I learned a lesson in Vietnam that applies to the church. Battle is a battle, no matter where you're at. Two platoons, one was mine, one another. We ran into each other in the middle of the night, and we each thought the other was the enemy.
Oh, gosh.
One man got killed.
Wow.
What I was thinking was, we could destroy each other
Yeah.
if we get off the path.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that just popped into my head.
That's a
when
good
we were
point.
talking about this,
Yep. Yep.
and Satan would love to do that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's happening right now.
Yes.
In our society.
I do
The way we're
too.
treating, people are treating each other.
We're divided. Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And hatred is really showing up big time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 6. And some of you probably have this memorized. So, Ephesians chapter 6, Paul is talking about spiritual warfare and our weapons, our coverage, the things that the believer has accessible in body armor. I'll just call it body armor, all right? So if you go to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, he's wrapping up his thoughts to these people. He says, finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. All right, stop there. That alone is going to send some churches and some preachers going, well, that's really battle kind of terminology, and I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, I'm just telling you that people don't like to talk about. I heard this on the radio today. Somebody said, I don't like to talk about fighting. I don't like to talk about battles. I'm going, darling, this is it's like you going to have a wake up call one of these days, because this is exactly what we're in, you know. And Paul, throughout the Bible, it says, be strong. The angel told him, be courageous, you know. And that is our call. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go back to what Jimmy Bell said. He quoted from John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come that you might have life and have no abundance.
Yeah.
He kept going back and emphasizing, he's out to kill you
Yeah.
and destroy you
Yeah.
and your family and this country.
Yes. Absolutely. And we get uncomfortable talking about it, but it's what is causing the problem. We can be uncomfortable all we want to be about being strong in the Lord and the strength, you know, might and the battle and stuff like that. But the truth is, that's the only thing that's going to keep you. I mean, I've never been in the military, but my understanding is in basic training they teach you how to protect yourself, you know, with so that you can accomplish what you've been called to accomplish.
Right, without question.
Right.
It's the same thing here. Paul is trying to tell Christians, if you want to win this spiritual battle, here is how this is done. Finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Verse 11, put on the full armor of God, so that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. I've talked about that scheme part before. That's not just a scheme, oh, how can I get him, right? That's a battle plan against your life and my life and against anything else he's opposing. Those are the schemes. That's a battle plan. So you're standing against a battle plan, something that's designed to take you out. All right, verse 12. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against, here it is again, rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. You see the hierarchy there again, just like it was pointed out in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. Thrones and dominions. You know, there's things here, there's a hierarchy of things that we work against. And sometimes it seems like, literally, and I don't say this flippantly, all of hell is fighting against this or that or us sometimes, or families.
Amen.
Yeah. Yes, Mike.
This is what's confused me. It says, wickedness in the heavenly places. That means there's wicked people in heaven. That means all the angels aren't cast down here.
No, not that heaven, but heavenly places are in that interpretive right there is the things that you and I can't see. That dimension, that spiritual realm, right?
Okay.
The things that you can't see. So, in other words,
And heaven is not a spiritual realm.
it is, but heaven is a place,
Yes.
right? But there are things in a dimension that we cannot see because we are finite,
Mm-hmm.
right? So angels can appear and disappear. We've seen that in the Bible,
Right.
Peter in jail,
Right.
right?
Right.
So an angel can look physical and then be gone, right? So where does it go? Well, it doesn't cease to be. It goes to a place that we can't see because we are finite and we have limitations. And so because we have limitations in the things we cannot see, we have to have what? Faith. To see in the things and understand things that we don't see. Because if we only trust the things we can see, that's not really faith. Right? We can't see God, but we can feel his presence. We trust that he is working on our behalf because his word says so. And then in our lives, there have been things that have happened that proved it. We didn't see that happen, but we saw the physical end of those things happening. Right? So those are the heavenly places,
Okay.
but not heaven itself.
Okay.
All right. Verse 13, therefore, take up the full armor of God that you may be able to resist in the evil day. There again, that's an action. All of this is an action. Stand firm. Resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. Again, it says, verse 14, stand firm. It's an action. Therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming missiles of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. With all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit. And with this in view, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints. That is all action. You do not sign up in the military, or you aren't called to the military to do nothing. You are there with a purpose, and your purpose has a mission. And Paul is saying it's the same. He uses military terms here for a reason. And the modern 21st sophisticated 21st century church can be all aflutter about, oh, I don't like the military connotation. Well, it's there. And it's there for a reason, because we're in a fight, you know? And with that, we either fight in God's way of doing this, or we're going to get blown over.
Aren't we referred to in places as the army of God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alan, then Rick.
Paul was a lot like Daniel. Paul said in 1 Thessalonians, pray without ceasing. Daniel's he recognized that this was his means,
Yes.
to stand.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't pray enough.
And if we're not united, it's difficult to fight the battle. Imagine an army with the commander telling a group to do something, and they all question it and go their own ways. But nothing's going to happen. It's going to be chaos, and nothing's going to get won. So that's why they teach it in boot camp. I mean, it starts out heavy. You do as you're told.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I even agreed with my CO one time and got chewed out because I agreed with him. It's not my place to agree with you. You just do as you're told.
Exactly. That is one of, to me, basic training was the best physical condition I could get. The knowledge that they deemed necessary for me to have, and the train of thought that when this man starts telling me to do something, I got it half done before he's done telling me.
Yeah.
Because that's the way battles are won and lost.
Right. Right.
So in thinking of the church as being united
Mhm.
and having the belt of truth, you know, that's what you follow.
Right. Right. No, I think it's right on, and there's and again, I have a limited understanding of the hierarchy in the military, but if you have a battle plan that comes from generals down to boom, 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 and I don't know how many sergeants are in a platoon or whatever, but you got one sergeant that says, well, I'm not sure that I agree with the direction of that, so I think we'll ignore this part of the edict here, and we'll do our own thing here, and this sergeant's over here is going, no, we're all in, right? To your point, Ray, I hadn't thought about that till you said that, but if within the breakout of the sergeants, or however that is done, if each one has a different interpretation of the orders, you are not going to go far.
No.
Right? You're not going to accomplish your mission. And I think maybe that's what Satan has done to the modern 21st century sophisticated North American church. Has got us debating the mission.
Yes.
He's got us debating the battle plan. And you've got churches going, I don't think that's right. Just ignore that part. That's too confusing. That part of the battle plan is too confusing. We're just going to ignore that, and we're going to do this. Right?